Hello. Uh, well, thank you to Susan and Robin for making this possible. And I thank all of you who will be listening in. So today I want to be talking about a whole year of solstices and equinoxes and a focus on Jupiter. I'd like to begin by speaking once again about solstices and equinoxes and the seasons and the breathing between the Earth and the rest of the cosmos. And this is to provide a background for exploring a year's flow of solstices and equinoxes and some key planetary occurrences on the solstices and equinoxes of 2022 and 2023. Now, this isn't a comprehensive study of every planet and their aspects throughout the year, but I'll be pointing out Jupiter throughout the year and how Jupiter and some other planets, asteroids, and aspects relate to the breathing phases of the seasons. We'll be looking at charts from my location here in Ecuador at the time of the solstices and equinoxes, but I'm using a 0 degree Aries ascendant for all the charts. Now, obvious to our five senses, the rhythmic seasonal living processes of the seasons have definite effects on the life of plants, the feeling life and actions of animals, and individual soul moods of people. On a global level, the rhythmic alternation of the lengths and days and nights and the variations of temperatures during the solstices are opposite in the northern and southern hemispheres. At an equinox, spring in one hemisphere and autumn in the other, there is an equilibrium of light, darkness, and temperature. But even the different layers of the atmosphere change during the seasons. I've mentioned this before, but there was this meteorological studies work back in 1971 where called something like the structure and dynamics of the upper atmosphere. And this was a report on 200 or so radar probes into the upper atmosphere during a 10-year research project. And during the summer, they found the signals echoed back strongly from an altitude of about 80 kilometers. In the winter, there were only weak signals coming back. And this was found to be true in both northern and southern hemispheres. The seasonal weather phenomena, air pressure, strength, and direction of wind currents, temperature, and the interactions of the various gases in the atmosphere also show they are part of the global seasonal cycle. Now, this kind of study is different from what is usually taught in school, maybe in the upper grades and in college for sure. And as school children, most of us have been taught only the very outwardly observable scientific explanations of what the relationship of the Earth is to the sun. Namely, as the Earth is tilted on its axis as it orbits the sun, one hemisphere during its summer is more exposed to the sun's rays than the other hemisphere, which is in its winter. In June, the northern hemisphere is leaning towards the sun, receiving its rays more directly and intensely, while the southern half is leaning away from the sun. The sun also rises higher in the summer sky than during the other seasons. So more rays and other things, which I'll be talking about, are permeating the atmosphere for a longer period of time. Each day, there's this experience, and the reverse is true in December when the northern half is leaning away from the sun while the southern hemisphere is leaning toward the sun. Now, consider everything I've mentioned so far as being the outward physical manifestations of spiritual phenomena. The seasonal cycle is also the breathing process of the Earth with the rest of the cosmos. It's not just the Earth. And according to anthroposophical research and other spiritual teachings, this breathing process affects the soul of the Earth And as new growth comes about in the springtime, in the springtime hemisphere, the life and soul forces begin to ascend out of the earth. They are exhaled out, if you will, into the atmosphere and the rest of the cosmos. And this exhaling continues throughout the summer. In autumn, the inhalation of these forces begins in the corresponding hemisphere. By winter, the deepest inhalation occurs. The spring and autumn equinoxes are like still points between inhalation and exhalation. And these times of equilibrium are often described superficially as being the same or very similar. However, if we give attention to the inner world, to our inner selves as well as the outer world, we feel and know that the spring equinox brings a sense of hope and potentiality, as the autumn equinox brings a sense of expectation and preparedness. On Earth, we can imagine this breathing between the solstices and equinoxes as like a lemniscate pattern between the northern and southern hemispheres. Not only are the Earth's life, soul, and spiritual forces breathing in and out, the spiritual life forces of the sun are also being inhaled and exhaled. The Earth's deepest in-breath of the sun's forces are during our winter. And just as life on Earth sleeps during the winter, and there's much activity within the Earth, we feel the warmth of spirit inwardly active within ourselves, which, all around the world we celebrate in various cultural ways. Everywhere there are festivals of light held somewhere around the winter solstice. And the reason for this includes and goes beyond the agrarian realities of the availability of food, where there exists an inner knowing or feeling sensing of the spiritual realities of the world and within ourselves. During the summer, as life and soul forces flow outwardly, we tend to give ourselves over to the abundance of nature and the warmth of the sun. At the furthest point of outbreath, we have to work harder to focus on our own light and warmth. And instead of losing ourselves, to the outward manifestations and display of light and warmth, we're now at a point in our evolution when we can be consciously aware instead of just instinctually aware of the processes in the cosmos and our relationship to them. We can also observe the manifestations of impulses for evolution and devolution. And today, when I describe forces as positive, they are for evolution, and as negative for devolution. As I said, it's easy to talk of inhalation, exhalation of the earth and sun in regards to the life forces and the seasons. But we have to think what else is being inhaled and exhaled. The sun is not only the source of warmth and light, but also life. Behind warmth is love, and behind light is consciousness and thought. And behind life is being and will. The rhythm between sun and earth is not only the breath that is intrinsic to each other, but also to the rest of the cosmos. The sun is the heart of the solar system. All the planets have their own natures and influences. The sun is the harmonizer, regulator, and disseminator of the planetary impulses. Through the sun, all these are breathed into us, and we breathe out into the world and the cosmos through the sun. As these processes exist outwardly, they are intrinsic to our own natural being and inner life, and as manifested in our hearts. Whether we harmonize and regulate in our lives or not, whether we love or not, whether we consciously connect with ourselves and others or not, is all breathed out into the world and cosmos. This is all part of the karmic law. And all that is not good for the planetary world is burnt up, as it were, by the sun to help keep harmony in the system. Yet, we're karmically responsible for these shortcomings and need to transform ourselves accordingly. When there's a solar eclipse, negative forces make their way untransformed into the soul and spirit worlds of the planets. And when there's a lunar eclipse, the influences of planetary and other beings who feed off of our negativity, our negative feelings, thoughts, and actions will easily inspire those of us who are predisposed to doing evil of some sort. And I bring this particular breathing up because of the last set of eclipses we had, and those coming up in 2023. There will be lunar eclipses on May 5th and October 28th, 2023. And the solar eclipses will occur on April 20th and October 14th, 2023. And I won't be going into these eclipses except to say that they act as valves, if you will, valves in the breathing between the Earth and Sun and the rest of the cosmos. From a certain point of view, the winter solstice marks the beginning of a year, just as a baby's first breath is considered to be the first entry into the world. So we can say that from the autumn equinox to the winter solstice is the first in-breath for the Earth, and all that lives upon the Earth. And from this perspective, let us explore the year by looking at the winter solstice of 2022. The spring equinox, summer solstice, and winter equinox of 2023. Okay, Sue, please stop. So the winter solstice of 2022 is magnificently marked, okay, just hours before by Jupiter's re-entry into Aries. And at this point of the deepest inward breath, Jupiter entered Aries, the beginning of a new zodiacal cycle, forming a waxing square to the sun. And here's Jupiter here by the ascendant. Jupiter's move through Pisces brought the dreaming of future possibilities and the magnified exposure of the obstructions to that future. In Aries, Jupiter brings new understanding and meaning, which fuels exuberance, positivity, and a feeling of capability. A sense of opportunity and newness permeates the air. There's an urge to take decisive action to turning visions into reality. The expansiveness of Jupiter lives positively through our ethics, justice, wisdom, and enthusiasm. And in Aries, our individual egos are appealed to and are activated by opportunities that come to us from outside as we expand out into the world. The flip side of this are challenges, which call us to exercise and question our abilities as we expand their expressions out into the world. Jupiter teaches us how challenges are opportunities, giving us drive and courage. Jupiter can also manifest as hubris, blind overextension, over-optimism, over-positivity, overindulgence, and impulsiveness. And these kinds of expressions of optimism are inspired, filled, and cloaked with self-righteousness and justifications. Now, on the day of Jupiter's ingress into Aries, it was in waxing square aspect of the sun. Mercury was in a waning quintile, and Mars in a waxing quintile to Jupiter. So Jupiter's opportunities and challenges to the sustainment of our personal sense of purpose and power, sun, right, gives creative crises between what we have built as our ego and towards what we are expanding ourselves. The dispositor is Mars, which was in Gemini at the time of Jupiter's ingress into Aries, and the self-initiating impulse to apply our energy towards desires and the fulfilling of Venusian values and aesthetics was raised to the mental plane, giving energy to what and how we expand out into the world through communication, travel, making connections, networking. Negatively, Mars and Gemini can disperse our attention, our will, and our activities in too many directions, weakening ourselves in whatever we intend. So no matter how positive the intentions may be, this may be the case. The Jupiterian crusader for a cause can become a militant, creating chaos and destruction instead of real change that benefits everyone. The questions that arise with Jupiter in Aries, Mars in Gemini, put before us challenges to our enthusiasm for doing things just because we can. Most of these challenges are born from the results of previous actions, social practices, and policies, to the degree we decide, desire, and intend based on unconscious likes and dislikes. And of course, unthinking identifications with blood, nation, or religion. That way, the likelihood is greater for an expansion of deploying technology towards the undermining, if not even destruction of others. And this technology is basically about how we use our words, essentially, and how we attain our aims. We either use it to build each other up, to expand our possibilities in our personal relationships and our communities, towards a cosmopolitan, all-inclusive, and accepting world, or we use it to empower our separate personal and collective identities and intentions at the expense of others. Of course, both of these directions will be taken by individuals, groups, and other entities simultaneously. And later today, Mars goes direct, and the gathering will forces towards one's values and ideals, as I've described them, start to wake into action. A new sense of understanding arising from deeper soul intentions motivate us to take a new direction regarding old unresolved issues. Mercury's waning quintile to Jupiter is a call for creative transformation of thinking and communicating, called for by whatever ways we are expanded into transpersonal realms. Now, we have to keep in mind that this exists on both, individual and collective levels. And Mars, in waxing quintile aspect to Jupiter, is also a call for creative transformation. During Jupiter's last 5 months traverse through Aries, it will cross over the slower Chiron and Eris. And meanwhile, the Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus will also cross these points. Whatever ways Jupiter's expansion and magnification bring to our wounds, violations, and vulnerabilities, they can help bring healing and encourage us to look beyond ourselves. And this is the opportunity to ask the parsable question, what ails thee? This expression of interest is the foundation of service to others, which is required to attain the Holy Grail, which Parsifal was eventually able to. And are we awake enough to ask this question of others, of other countries, of ourselves? The assertion of self out of fear and attempts to be first at everything are overcompensations. Eris, also in Aries, points to where and how we need to gain strength and courage to face the world. And while Jupiter crosses Chiron on March 12th, on the 15th degree of Aries, new opportunities arise for healing deep-seated wounds. And as these old wounds resurface, we'll have the opportunity to feel and acknowledge the previously neglected, unprocessed, and hidden issues to start or continue a healing process. Jupiter will help us gain a bigger picture of the role of wounds in healing, what they have in our personal and collective evolution, thus helping to make healing more accessible. And this is also a time to come across or revisit new teachings or teacher or mentor. Jupiter conjuncts Chiron every 17 years or so, and in Aries every 47 years on average. Venus is also conjunct Jupiter and Chiron at the beginning of March, bringing in relationship and security issues to the fore. Impulsive approaches towards what we value or love can bring out inconsiderate behavior, or altruism is felt, but may not extend beyond one's own needs. Or altruism develops as part of a need to heal ourselves and our relationships. There is a need to look for deeper qualities in the other and to find meaningfulness. Some will feel a need to develop openness and vulnerability to start a healing process in their relationships. Jupiter was last with Chiron in Aries back in March 1975, all the way through March 1976. And some things to think about relative to our current affairs are, well, in 1976, we had the first Mars landing photo. Now we have these newest photos, which are amazing. Apple was founded, the AI development. US weather and biowarfare programs were suspended. Now there's cryptographic key protocols developed. We have blockchain today. There's the H1N1 vaccine fiasco, and then we have the vaccine controversy today. The term meme was developed in 1975. The first Lyme disease diagnosis happened then. Bill Gates founds Microsoft. Assassination attempts on Gerald Ford. Now we have hang Mike Pence. The attempts on Nancy Pelosi, the Michigan governor, Gretchen Whitmer. Back then, the Weather Underground bombing. Today we have the Proud Boys and others. The Watergate scandal. Then we have the Trump attempted coup, taking secret documents and everything else he does. The Mars Viking launch. We have the Roe versus Wade, which started in 73 and 74, now affecting policies, right? Jimmy Hoffa disappears. Now we have contemporary truckers striking different parts of the world. Well, this is a bit of a rabbit hole. So anyway, to move on, Eris will be in Aries for a little more than 25 years. This marks the end of its 560-year cycle. This points to the connection to humanity's evolving individuated consciousness. The beginning of this particular cycle coincided with the rise of individuation. Think of the European Renaissance and Reformation and the rise and subsequent time of scientific and technological progress. This sinking deeper into materialistic thought and inventiveness and how they influence subsequent lifestyles, these have powerfully affected our thinking and how we view and apply ourselves in the world. And Eris gives recognition of our own and others' personifications of positive qualities, resourcefulness, and a desire for self-improvement. This goddess of discord shows that collectively we still have a way to go to evolve beyond impulsive personhood, as did Eris in the Greek myth. To whatever degree this recognition is not given, feelings of revenge, jealousy, and rivalry arises. Strife ensues, as evidenced by the ignored fairy godmother in Sleeping Beauty, which is a transformed rendition of the Greek myth. And all this will gain intensity and importance as Pluto goes through Aquarius. Saturn will enter Pisces on March 8th. Pisces is the culmination of the zodiacal process, and Saturn brings discernment, definition, and clarity to our dreams, which aid us in manifesting them. However, we're obligated to our past actions, our past feelings and thoughts. And those that are negative and not in service to forward evolution are unconsciously living in us and constantly rise up and create suffering. And this is a time to pay attention to our intuitions. The tendency to take life seriously may give us a melancholic air, or we may be indecisive and moody. Suffering at the hands or words of others must be carefully discerned as to be either the result of our own actions or as lessons for establishing clear boundaries. Guilt and shame are stubborn stumbling blocks. And besides getting clear about our own dynamics around guilt and shame, we need to learn not to identify with other people's troubles nor any negativity. The gift of such healing within ourselves is the ability to responsibly serve others. Now, here's the chart for the spring equinox of 2023. And this occurs on March 20th. And the spiritual and soul forces now that have been inbreathed, they have been taken in and worked upon. So all really you can say our karma is worked on, or not. Yeah, and this time is a moment of calm before the outbreath. And all that was taken in through mutable, nurturing water is about to breathe out through cardinal inspirational fire. The new cycle initiates impulsively, in Aries. In 3 days, Pluto enters fixed mental Aquarius. And this is calling for a rebirth through breaking any outmoded or crystallized forms of self-definition and rejecting anything that defines ourselves and society. And this calls for detached, objective rethinking about ourselves and all our social forms, so we can think about future possibilities. Dissatisfaction about what hasn't been acted upon or changed will be ever more apparent during this 21-year transit. Now, there's much available to read and listen to about this transit, so I'll just speak briefly about it. And suffice it to say, Pluto in Aquarius will be the overshadowing impulse for transformation for the next 21 years. The first 7-year phase of Pluto's cycle begins a few days after the solstice, and we'll see ideological conflicts between the future and past. The impulsive feelings and actions of people who hold either direction will be the drama on the stage, on the social stage. The next 7 years will bring about opportunities for a transformed collective emotional mood setting. The stage for the next group of 7 years for new ways of thinking and doing. The other side of rebirth, of course, is death and destruction. This time of Pluto and Aquarius is a time for rethinking who we are and what we have created that will be preparation for our experience of standing before an abyss while Pluto is in Pisces, deciding whether or not to surrender to a new spiritual reality. Pluto moving into Aries will be the start of new unknown directions. Pluto in Aquarius will give a foreshadowing of the future when the vernal equinox goes into Aquarius, which is when we will be most seriously faced with the decision to take a path toward cultivating our spiritual moral individualism or to fall into an abysmal future of, self-deluded and empty human animal existence, or, transhumanist existence. A week after the equinox, Mercury is conjunct to Jupiter in Chiron in Aries. Intelligence and mental reckonings take on the quickening, expansive Jupiterian perspectives in the cardinal fire of Aries. And this will fuel tempers and passions in conflicts over what is true. Rash impulsiveness of emotions are felt and projected upon others, especially in issues around wounds, crimes, trauma, insults, acts of revenge. This will also fuel a quickening of thought and insight based on values and the seeking of depth and ideals, helping to bring about healing and further evolution. Now, Venus will have been conjunct the lunar north node at the equinox, bringing in the intentions of personal values and sense of worth. The tension between the two different attitudes will be experienced within individuals themselves in personal and other social relationships. For the first 3 weeks of April, Jupiter conjuncts the Sun, exactly on the 11th. The air of optimism, enthusiasm, largesse, and magnanimity is intensified, as are the feelings of vitality, authority, and love. And there's also a magnification and intensity of pride, overindulgence, religiosity for those who are susceptible. On May 16th, Jupiter leaves Aries and enters Taurus right before midnight. Taurus calls for a grounding of Aries impulses. Jupiter in Taurus calls us to make real practical action to materialize our ideals and goals. And we'll be called to learn to trust as we take step-by-step approaches to get to our desired results. And we'll also be called to concretely recognize that the answers we seek and the power to accomplish our goals live within ourselves. We have to push aside all distractions and put our trust in the wisdom that lives within ourselves, and that we are supported in our aims as we diligently work on ourselves. This is a wake-up call to recognize and put into practice the taking 2 steps forward for inner moral growth for every step we take towards spiritual development. This keeps us grounded, balanced, and humble. This will be especially clear when Jupiter goes retrograde September 5th through December 30th, 2023. The retrograde period will be a good time to reevaluate our goals and our methods to reach them. We must face the tough questions and answer them to refine and stabilize plans so that they are sustainable. As much as we feel charitable and sympathetic as the power of positive thinking is in the air, we must be aware of any tendency towards extravagance, over-optimism, and hubris. The focus on ideals, goals, and the materializing of them will be determined by each person's basis for identity, security, and values. The ideals and goals of people whose security is determined through their identity, through religion, political leaders, celebrities, race, nation, fear, and hate will be as focused upon and enthused about as those whose security is determined upon a sense of individuality based on the degree of mastery of their own thinking, feeling, and doing. Some time ago, I wrote about Jupiter's process of pruning last year sometime. It still holds true today. And Jupiter points to the future, expanding us to become what we intrinsically are and what we can be. It connects us with cosmic thoughts and the wisdom we have accrued over lifetimes. It is our enthusiasm, our reaching out to the world and beyond. And this lives within the bounds of our Saturnian definition of self and the world as we envision our activities in the world. A retrograde period is a time to revisit what we have become within and what we have created in our expansion out into the world. In this reflective time, we may gain insight to expand in a true and productive way in the garden of our lives. Sometimes it is wise and necessary for a gardener to prune a tree. And as it is true for trees, it's also true for ourselves. Just as dead, diseased, and damaged limbs and branches should be cut from a tree, our obsolete and destructive behaviors need to be stopped. For the tree, growth forces are then more available for new, healthier growth. When we stop bad habits, our forces are also freed up for new habits of our choosing. In fact, we become freer as our consciousness, emotions, and actions are not directed by the psycho-emotional dynamics behind the negative habits. Thus, we are freer to expand out into the world. Now, gardeners who create espaliered trees use this knowledge to enhance a tree's productivity of fruit, making it easier for harvesting and to fit a more symmetrical aesthetic. And we can use our knowledge to shape our inner life to make ourselves more productive. Bonsai is a related activity, except that what is pruned, both healthy and unhealthy, is aimed to direct the growth forces to create natural shapes, even transforming a young plant to look like an ancient old tree. We can say this is like purposely following a path of self-development. We come into this world with whatever degree of wisdom we have accrued, and throughout life's trials and pains, we develop wisdom. And during Jupiter's retrograde period, we go inward to find the voice of wisdom urging us to get real with ourselves and for the rest of the world. What habits do I need to let go of? And what new habits do I want to develop? What relationship dynamics do I need to cast off so I relate in the way I truly want? What is one psychological parallel to pruning healthy growth to create a desired, aesthetically pleasing shape? It can be argued that pruning is a Saturnian gesture, and there's truth in this, but in the inner knowledge that recognizes what is desirable for soul and spiritual growth is the foundation for personal discernment and discipline. The discernment and discipline to create new habits is also Saturnian. The sign and house in which Saturn and Jupiter, especially when Jupiter is retrograde, will give us the information to answer the above questions. It's our inner wisdom which allows us to recognize the answers. In the last week of May, Mars makes a waxing square from Jupiter and opposes Pluto, while Jupiter is in a waxing square to Pluto. But instead of thinking in terms of octaves, I prefer thinking of Mars as a conscious will as opposed to the unconscious will of Pluto. Mars opposing Pluto means that it's conjunct Pluto's polarity point. The soul intentions for forward future evolution is now energized with desire and initiative born of inspiration. It will be in Scorpio, which focuses the will towards determination in a magnetic way, potentized by whatever degree of self-discipline one has. Mars opposing Pluto wants to give one's evolutionary intent social meaning. We must find a social form or framework to place one's will towards. And this means working alongside others in some capacity. And this will bring confrontations, clashes, and lessons about power, one's own and that of others. And positively, we will develop more awareness of social realities, of our own power, and how to use it selflessly. Mars in waxing square to Jupiter calls us to move ahead with new social, expansive Jupiterian thoughts. They're being called through rebuilding new foundations of social and personal meaning by Jupiter's waning square to Pluto. And this particular trio calls us to endeavor to trust our abilities to accomplish things. And this is a call to not so much contain our drives, but to let them take over. And of course, the qualities of our actions will depend on the degree of self-development and mastery we have of ourselves. And we may be uncomfortable with our own vitality or the vitality of others because of a fear of going too far in aggressiveness. We can allow ourselves to be consumed by our own energy. Then great accomplishments of some sort may be manifested. Now, negatively, we'll see those who are over-aggressive and difficult or impossible to harness due to their thoughtlessness of others as they seek to fulfill their own agendas. On June 1st, Mars still squaring Jupiter, which will also conjunct the lunar north node. The intentions that have been developing since the conjunction between the lunar north node and Pluto in November 2010 are now magnified with Jupiter's enthusiasm and the urge to rebuild from the past by putting new ideas into reality. And this will be a time for finding teachers right for your particular stage and your path, or finding others who support your path and intentions. On another level, people will gravitate easily to each other's side, all according to their soul nature. This is kind of an all or nothing time, making the division wider between people of differing mindsets, especially those who are endeavoring to align themselves with transpersonal truths, and those who are defending dogma or agendas of any kind. Now, looking at the summer solstice of this year, occurs on June 21st, as we know, Jupiter will be in square aspect to the moon. and septile to the sun. The new forms one wants to expand into being will be experiencing some kind of crisis in the face of past forms, either within ourselves or in our environment with others. And this may lead to aligning oneself to a higher spiritual purpose through personal sacrifice or social ostracism and the fulfillment of personal destiny, or some kind of compulsive and inexplicable needs and social forces bring the unexpected to us. On the solstice, Jupiter will be in waxing sextile to Saturn, as Saturn is in waning trine to the sun, and also quincunx to the moon. And life's potential is focused and defined creatively as a social release by Saturn through the use of one's understanding and abilities. This will focus consciousness through clarifying one's concepts of self and of others. The impulses of Jupiterian social activity and Saturnian defining of identity and security gives rise to a constructive application of understanding towards instinctive development and growth. Now, retrograde Pluto is still in a square relationship with the lunar nodes, but has moved from being in sextile with the sun to being in quincunx with the sun. What has been developed as a sense of special purpose will now be brought through a process of clarification and readjustment. This process consists of questioning oneself and one's abilities and one's sense of purpose and how to connect it to others. Those who do not question themselves and justify their stance and actions will be stuck in a cycle of self-inflation and false security, yet feel unfulfilled. And those who have awoken in humility will find it easier to connect their sense of purpose with social needs. And part of this clarification is through questioning the status quo, which is defined, by each person's evolutionary state. The perception of what is the status quo will be highly polarized, and dissatisfaction and divisiveness will accelerate during the retrograde period. Mars in waxing square to Uranus awakens the power to break through social constraints, and tempers will fly. And either impulsive independence ignores positive and solid foundations in relationships and social structures, and then destroys too much, or anger stirs the pot and motivates real change based on meaningful values. This is, where Venus conjunct Mars. Most likely both will be acted out. And for some, breaking personal and societal restraints for unconventional emotional release can be quite sexy. Yeah. Unfortunately, for those inclined, sexual violence will rise, as will the anger regarding such violence, or any violence. Positively, the power and purpose behind our values and ideals is creatively released to make drastic changes in ourselves and society. On July 12th, the lunar north node moves into Aries, inspiring and encouraging us to not be afraid to take a stand for what one senses as higher truth. And this begins with standing tall as an individual rather than being an extension of someone or something else. This placement brings on lessons of self-consciousness and the price for prior indecisiveness. For some, this will mean dropping the attitude of having to fight for survival and replace it with focusing on the positive thoughts and conditions that helped develop one's individuality. And this goes hand in hand with overcoming a sensitivity to the criticisms, disharmonious actions, or needs of others. Think of Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. One's own tranquility will be challenged by, yet found in the balancing the need to be with others and the need to be alone. On July 23rd through September 4th, Venus is retrograde. The values that have been established or are still developing and are needed in the search for personal meaning and for being in relationships with others are being more deeply internalized. Unconscious motivations arise, as do urges to move against the perceived normal direction of life. Feelings of wanting to emotionally retreat or withdraw may come up. The purpose of this would be to clarify one's values, self-value, and meaning so we can act accordingly and be involved only in relationships that reflect such values and meaning. How do we love? What do we love? Do we see beauty in the world? Are we satisfied with what we have and with who we are? The last week of August, the first week of September, Mars will go into Libra. Mars will be urging action upon such values, self-worth, and in our equanimity, in ourselves and outwardly in our relationships. How will we bring the love that we are and have out into the world? The exhalation of human soul activity out into the world around us and into the spiritual world has reached its fullest now. Reflections and questions about what we have done towards our karmic gifts and challenges we inhale from the cosmos are to be considered. What have we given to the spiritual world through our thoughts, feelings, and actions? Have they been, nutritious to the spiritual world and will be given back to us? And the world is positive and helpful towards forward evolution? Or will they be rejected and the negativity reflected back to us to deal with? The answer is both positive and negative, recognized and not, will come to us to deal with in the autumn. So at the equinox, autumn equinox, retrograde Pluto in Capricorn is in waxing trine to the sun. And now the sun, which has just gone into Libra, of course, and even though they are in different elements, there's a 3-degree orb, which carries the essential quality of the trine. The manifesting through growth and expansion of creating and establishing one's purpose and expressing one's values and in relationship, especially through the strength of will, is supported by the sun entering into cardinal Libra. This shows that the need to eliminate conditions and dynamics that hinder one's personal power and creative expression. Those who live in this way usually support others to do the same. Yet there are those who involve themselves with others and situations for the purpose of living vicariously through the power of another or through agreed upon agendas for power. And these are living out, they're living out impulses of devolution. The Virgo Mercury's waning sesquiquadrate to Pluto brings out the creative activity between the intellect and its communication in service towards renewal and elimination of social regulations, laws, customs, rules. The element of crisis comes out in those who speak out against these norms, those who endeavor to senselessly break everything down, and those who are compulsively holding on to the status quo. Confrontations between these people are intensified by Uranus retrograde in Taurus. And it's waxing trine to Pluto and Mercury in waxing trine to Uranus. So there's internal instability, disruption, change, and inventiveness. These are all operating in individual and collective psyches. Mars in Libra is in opposition to Chiron in Aries. The way we express our will, desire, and passions in the realm of relationship brings out and provides paths toward our personal and social wounds. 54 years ago, Chiron entered Aries, as did Mars a couple of months earlier. And this was in the middle of the occurrence of riots in several US cities, all based on issues of racial inequality. And this is being revisited by the fearful perceptions and backward policies preventing the teaching about racial inequality and its history in the US, prevention of so-called critical race theory, also prohibits the teaching about and the involvement of those of the LGBTQ, et cetera, communities. And those who see equality in all people are those who will help heal this particularly deep wound. And this is, of course, another aspect of the US Pluto return and its entry into Aquarius. Now, 54 years earlier than that, in 1918, Chiron in Aries, the segregation era was at its height in the US. And the Great Migration, African Americans poured into industrial cities to fill labor shortages created by World War I. And they gained more voting power. By the 20s, the NAACP evoked what they called the New Negro and lobbied aggressively for a federal anti-lynching law. And from 1918 to 1920, the flu epidemic infected 500 million worldwide and resulted in 50 million deaths. Something like 675,000 in the US alone. And Blacks were given substandard care, and even in death, their bodies were neglected by the white infrastructure. Pre-Civil War in 1860, when Chiron was in Aries, the term United States was a plural noun. In Lincoln's first inaugural address in 1861, he used the word union 20 times and the word nation not once. And on July 4th, 1861, Lincoln addressed Congress using the word union 32 times and nation only 3 times. Yet in his second inaugural address, Lincoln spoke of one side seeking to dissolve the Union in 1861, and the other side accepting the challenge of war to protect the nation. And this wound and all that is connected with it is still with us today. This aspect of the US Pluto return manifests the karmic law of that which, that which is not healed will raise its head again, right? Not only are racial issues still alive today, the reemergence of state separatism is strong, with outward denial of the obvious racial elements lurking in the minds and intentions of the supporters. Going further back with Chiron's cycle is a work in itself, right? But I do want to note that the first African slave to set foot on North America, known as Esteban, was one of the 4 survivors of a failed expedition to Florida. He and 3 others, including Cabeza de Vaca, walked all the way to a Spanish colony in Mexico after surviving slavery by an indigenous chief. And they returned in 1536, a year that Chiron went into Aries. Anyway, let's move on to other things. On the autumn equinox, Venus in Leo will be in waxing square to Jupiter, and values and the impulse to love unconditionally and magnanimously is given the power of compassion. And Venus's waxing trine to Chiron and her productivity through the waning sextile to Mars. Otherwise, the individual and social wounds and traumas which have not been healed will be expressed with negative delusion, biting jealousy and spite, yet given a face of magnanimous propaganda with over compensatory confidence. Halfway through autumn, on October 14th, there's a solar eclipse, 21 degrees or so Libra, and the lunar eclipse at 5 degrees Taurus on the 28th. And Pluto goes direct 3 days before the solar eclipse. The cosmic reply to all human experience that has been breathed out since spring will now be on the in-breath. All that is related to the karma of our thoughts, actions, and feelings in our relationships to self and the other, and which are nutritious, so to speak, to the spiritual world or not, comes back to us. At the lunar eclipse, those who are predisposed to the devolutionary impulses will be inspired to keep to their course. And they will be following their own logic based on justifications to keep their agendas of power, control, and security. The positive evolutionary impulses exhort us to find equanimity in the developing and maintaining of our values and life meaning within ourselves and manifested in all our relationships. For those who are on this path, these eclipses will recharge and give impetus for further growth. On a related note, this is right before the next state and congressional elections in the US, which will set a tone or determine a reaction for the presidential election in 2024. This is the winter solstice chart, 2023. The moon will be within 5 degrees of exact conjunction to Jupiter and waxing square to Pluto. The instinctual ability to adapt and develop to maintain oneself and to establish relationships, to actualize one's purpose will be instinctually expressed for the purpose of self-discovery. And this process is part of eliminating external dependencies in order to develop one's own internal security. These dependencies may be on other people or circumstances or one's own emotional dynamics. Self-knowledge and healing arises from crises to the degree that there is no denial or rejection of the feelings of insecurity. In the next day or so, the moon will be crossing Jupiter and then Uranus. And as it opposes Venus. These transits will emphasize a call for a wider perspective, which will create a dramatic break from anything that hinders one from the rebirth of self-value and esteem. Otherwise, dramatic or even traumatic situations will break people away from their source of external security. Whichever direction one will take, their actions, Mars, will bring about a readjustment of their feeling life. This is the quincunx to Moon. Venus in Scorpio is in quincunx aspect to the lunar north node in Libra, which is conjunct Eris and trine Mars. The desire for self-improvement gives energy, a desire to persevere, and a sense of resourcefulness towards the readjusting of oneself to one's evolutionary soul intentions. Otherwise, we're in discord with ourselves and project outwardly in quarrels and arguments, jealousy, and general discord with others. A worst case scenario would be causing discord, for the sake of creating discomfort, pain, or general chaos out of spite or some kind of twisted sense of control. Over the years, my observations have shown that cycles do not exist in a static way, nor does human consciousness. And we're at a stage of being able to develop a clear, objective sense of I, capital I, and of other, and recognizing the spiritual dynamics in ourselves and in nature. The evolutionary states and conditions of each one of us are different, but generally there are those who endeavor to consciously work as individuals and those who are of a group consciousness. A divide is experienced between these two streams, right? I've conversed with many people who experience time as speeding up. And this is due to the growing consciousness of our evolutionary growth. It is in this that the evolutionary gap is widening, especially between those who are endeavoring towards living, creating, and expanding what is true, good, and beautiful in life, and those who gravitate towards a materialism of power and control. And I say this fully knowing that there are those who hold that that power and control are expressions of truth, goodness, and beauty through a thoroughly materialistic view of the world. There will be those who fall into the abyss of losing one's humanity through the melding of computers and machines with the human body, or by devolving into a more animalistic existence. We live in a proverbial interesting time in which the devolutionary forces are more intense, and we must strengthen our powers of discernment and decision-making towards what is forward. Okay, and with this in mind, I will leave you with a verse from Rudolf Steiner. We must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror of what comes out of the future. We must acquire serenity in all feelings and sensations about the future. We must look forward with absolute equanimity to everything that may come. And we must think only that whatever comes is given to us by a world directive full of wisdom. It is part of what we must learn in this age, namely to live out of pure trust, without any security in existence, trust in the ever-present help of the spiritual world. Truly, nothing else will do if our courage is not to fail us. And let us seek the awakening within ourselves every morning and every evening. So here I will end with this. And thank you very much. And I wish everyone the very best.
Thank you very much, Michael. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how long that was. I know it was longer.